sort of degree of democratization and civic discourse that the election has unleashed is incredible. I don't think I've seen anything like it in my life. It's not, 60-something years. But I think it sort of surpasses some of the stuff in the 60s, especially I think the level of the discussion, the March for Women, the March for Science, all of these things, people are saying, oh, gee whiz, we can't be silos and totally autonomous from each other. We have to be involved in politics. We have to be involved in the sort of democratic system. So there are opportunities and challenges, but there are opportunities and challenges for us as we go about thinking about how digital environments play out in local areas. So some of the Mozi opportunities that I think are, it's a chance really to start from the ground and to build up. And I think that as a potential learning experience, it's fantastic. One of the things that I did teaching was I really tried, even if you were not going to go into computers, I tried to do what I could to sort of demystify it. It's all, behind the scenes, it's all bean counting, which we used to say, but now we say analytics, but more or less the same thing, is kind of reducing things to bits. And so some of the opportunities, learning by building, learning by sharing, and really getting in and sort of learning by doing, I think, are the main opportunities. Some of the challenges are not to be an accidental blip, like this sort of the community network movement of old, even though I think that I hope it had some effect on things. But also, if we concentrate only on building our nugget of the internet, our atom of the internet, how does it transcend? And how do we speak with other communities? And so that's something that I think is really one of the next challenges for the Mozi group. And I'm not saying that they may be thinking about it already, but it's one thing to be developing your internet, but really the problems that are now been unleashed on the world, and also even local problems have global causes, and vice versa. Things that you do on a local level can have effect outside. So we're not a zillion little islands. We're densely connected. Also, this idea of participatory design, where people are designing their own environment, it's not a trivial thing. You don't want the people that are sort of doing supplying the basic tools to tell people what to do. But if you don't provide enough, then they're going to be just sort of foundering, or they will recreate the old stuff. Like, oh, now we have a kind of a version of Facebook. And so I think that these are some of the challenges. Basically, I sort of, when people see this, it's kind of talking about just some ideas for the future direction of Mozi. Is I have the box itself in the center, the technology. There's the community that's now involved with it, what kind of goals they have, what are the characteristics. The sort of the local contextual challenges at the top. And then I have things that could be sort of input, like the briefing kits, workshops, I think are probably a good thing to have beforehand. Also, what is the cultural trajectory of the group? That's a big thing. And then also, I threw in as a plug these patterns that I worked on with about 80 other people over a long period of time. Each one is kind of a provocation or a little sort of perspective on a card that you can use, and then going into this, you can sort of think how we're going to use it and what we want out of it. We would like to be able to look at different cases. Why was this one successful? Why was this one not successful? Maybe we develop an atlas. Maybe there's other apps that we can come out of it. how do we coordinate with other communities and how do we coordinate with other Mazi communities, and that's my 10 minutes that may have been 9 or 11. Okay.
Thank you. So Harris will continue with the.
Any questions from Doug? I don't know. Okay.
Doug or Luca?
Yes, we can continue with the hands-on session now with the Mazizone toolkit.
So to understand what is a community network and how you can set up by your own, and how you can use it and you can modify according to the needs of your community and your neighborhood. Sorry, it's the new computer does not understand the Could you pass us in?
While you are preparing it, I just had a comment what you were saying about the fact that participatory design is a challenge, and I think indeed it is. And just to clarify, when I was speaking about communities define their own governance system, it does not mean that if you have 90,000 users, everyone will actively participate to how every single technical element has to be designed. If you define your own governance system, you can have representatives. You can trust someone to be a good engineer that is working for the public good, and being the person that will design the, together with others, design the network infrastructure, because you know that that person will do a good job and better than what you maybe as a total knowledgeable person on technical issues may do. So the fact of the definition of participatory governance does not mean that everyone has to do everything. Just to clarify.
Right.
Also, but if you have to do it, it's a very complex
I
system.
totally agree with you. Yeah, I wasn't trying to challenge anything you were saying.
No, obviously, just clarify to make
But
sure that
in any sort of participation, I think, because your participation isn't just, I mean, we participate every day, but when people are having sort of participatory design sessions, or where you're specifically talking about participation, there are these sort of parameters that are being set, and if you squeeze them too tight, then people have no, room to move. They're sort of forced to do a certain way. And if they're too broad, saying, "What am I doing here?" And then the guy might say, "Well, you tell me what you're doing here," and so why? It's not even a framework, and so you kind of need a framework.
Exactly, precisely. Actually, so there is, Elinor Ostrom won a Nobel Prize doing research on common pool resources. And she precisely stated that you have to manage common pool resources in an effective, sustainable fashion. You need to have a sound governance system defined from the very beginning. So having a common resource does not mean that you have something common and everyone does whatever he wants. It means that you have to define a governance system. You can do it democratically. You can choose to have a democratic organization of the infrastructure, but you need to do it from the very beginning, because otherwise you will end up having a lot of problems and all the system will break up. If you, from the very beginning, define how the system is managed with whom, what are the institutions, the low-scale institutions that will deal with problems, if you have any problems. Those are elements of the governance system that you have to define from the very beginning, because at a certain moment, you will have this kind of problem, and if you do not have someone that will be able to solve them, well, everything breaks up.
But I would quibble with that, because you don't know precisely what situations you will come up with, and so the idea of designing everything in from the start, I think, really isn't the answer
No.
either, because what about, there was no guarantee of freedom of expression until a few hundred years ago. And so that had to evolve and come into it. And so these things have to change.
When I was speaking about designing things from the very beginning, obviously does not mean in an exhaustive way foresee any kind of possible problem, because you cannot do it. But in an exhaustive way, foresee the mechanism that will allow you to deal with the problem. Then it is not. It's any kind of architectural design. You cannot understand every problem you will have since the very beginning, but you can try to analyze the system and define who will be the people or the task force or the body that will deal with the specific problem, or even the contractual arrangement. If you have a common agreement, if you have a handshake agreement, it's good, but if you have any lawsuit, it's difficult to handle only with handshake agreements. If you have a self-regulatory agreement made by the participants on which everyone, it's sort of constitution of the community networks. Everyone agrees on how to deal with things, and you have rules on paper. We create of course, enough entertainment.
You were very good. So I'm Hansi Afis from the University of Thessaly in Greece, and we will see together the Mazizone toolkit and how it empowers citizens to build their own networks and control their digital world. So the motivation behind the development of such a toolkit is that, as you know, citizens today fear digital technologies, and this has a lot of reasons. This is very reasonable, because the mainstream internet has a lot of disadvantages. As you may know, there are privacy issues, and of course there is a lack of social aspects in the structure of the mainstream internet.